Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage author and adventurer Neal Peterson.
Good afternoon. Welcome. AWC, we all know people in the world who carry baggage. Those folks who say, poor me, it's not my fault, I can't do this, or I can't do that. Well, today, instead of talking about baggage, I want to talk about a treasure chest. Yes, a treasure chest. The only difference between baggage and a treasure chest is the content. And for me, I get to choose the content based on my philosophy. In my life, there are no barriers, there are only solutions. And hence, I have 3 advantages. Now, just bear with me on these advantages. Advantage number 1, I was born black in apartheid South Africa, a country which said, based on the color of my skin, what hospital I could be born in, what school I could attend, what neighborhood I could live in. Apartheid was a harsh era in my country, South Africa's history. Advantage number 2, I was born in a working class family. My father was a commercial diver, but my father became an alcoholic. And through this disease of alcoholism, he could not hold down a job. Eventually, he became a laborer in a factory. When he retired, his pension was less than $150 a month in a society that required 3 times that just to survive. My mother is a school teacher. She was a school teacher, and we know the contributions that school teachers make to society are immense, but their compensation is minuscule. So in our household, we lived on the borderline of poverty. Advantage number 3. You see, I can walk today, but I don't take this for granted because I could not always walk. When the big guy upstairs was handing out hip sockets, for some reason, I was not paying attention. And so in the left hip, where we should have a ball and socket joint, I lacked the cup. As a result, I went through 3 major surgeries. And that last surgery left me in a body cast from my ankle to my chest. If I wanted to see a different view, a nurse or a doctor physically had to pick me up and shift me around. Now, elected officials, you hear me speak about my 3 advantages, but you've just heard me speak about prejudice, economic hardship, and physical disability. And you're saying this guy is crazy. Those are not advantages, those are huge disadvantages. Well, if you go back to that philosophy, in my life, there are no barriers. There are only solutions. My mother said, son, life isn't always fair. Ask those who've just lost their alcohol tax money. Life isn't always fair. And sometimes you have to work harder than somebody else. But if you can overcome whatever life throws at you and choose to carry no chips on your shoulders, then it doesn't matter what life will throw in your path, you shall overcome that too. If you choose to maintain a positive attitude, to be a courageous leader, then life will be with a little bit less struggle, and you can be successful. That is how we turn our baggage into advantages. It's by the choices we make. Each and every one of you in this room has been dealt a hand of cards. You can't change that fact. But how you choose to play the hand is totally up to you. Hence, my treasure chest. So this morning when you woke up here in Washington State, did you wake up smiling? Yes! The sun shone and we are alive because we can make a difference. This is my journey that I hope will inspire you on your long road to do what you need to do for your citizenry, for the people of this amazing state. When I lay in that hospital bed, a doctor making his round of the ward, in my body cast, he showed up at my bedside. Our ward was segregated. And one day he said to me, son, what are you interested in? I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa. We had the Indian Ocean on one side, the Atlantic on the other. I grew up with the stories of my father and his time at sea. I did not hear the fairy tales, but the real-life nautical adventures. And a part of our community were fishermen. I grew up going through water therapy in between the 3 surgeries. And so when this doctor asked me, son, what are you interested in? I said, boats. And a few days later, this doctor showed up with an entire stack of sailing magazines. I was too young to read the words, but a picture will paint 1,000 words. I saw pictures of beautiful yachts gliding through the water, and I thought just someday, just maybe, I could be on a boat. I saw pictures of tropical white sandy beaches with palm trees and turquoise waters, possibly the Caribbean. And I thought just maybe someday I could be on a tropical island. You see, those pictures gave me hope. And hope is the energy of change. Those pictures enabled me to say I can transition from this hospital bed to a world out there, a world of possibilities. This is what vision is all about. What is the vision you have for your cities? What is the vision you have for Washington State? How will you transition from where you are right now to that world of possibilities? I knew that someday, somehow, some way, my life would be different. But it was not a journey without its own set of struggles. My mother was a very key person in my life. My mother encouraged me to dream. My mother always said to me, ask 3 powerful questions of yourself, and if you can emphatically say yes to all 3, you will have less struggle. And that first question, she said, ask of yourself, whatever I do, is it right for me? And each and every one of us in this room can justify our actions, even if you are a drug dealer. Which brings us to the second question. Whatever I do, is it right for my family? And again, each and every one of us in this room can justify that answer. The drug dealer can say, look at the nice house my mama lives in, or the nice school my kids go to. And most people stop at that second question. But you did not stop at that second question. You asked the third. Whatever I do, is it right for my community? Now the drug dealer is in trouble. Today, we do not just live in little isolated communities, we live in interconnected communities. What happens here in Vancouver has an impact in Spokane or some other parts of this country, of this state and this country. Today we live in a global society, and I truly believe we must think globally, but we must act locally. And you of all people know about acting locally. So if you can say what I do is right for myself, it is right for my family, and it is right for my community, and emphatically say yes, our lives do become better because you get to make that impact each and every day. My mother, at age 88, last year, received an honorary doctorate for her contribution to education and political awareness in South Africa. She continued to set a high standard and a high bar. There are always going to be those who will be around for a long time. They will expect the best out of us. And that is why meetings like today are so important. Because being a part of AWC is about absorbing the collective brain power, the wisdom of the elders who sat here and have been there before and done these things. It is this journey of the collective that enabled me to dream and to dream big. And around age 11, I became an avid reader. I was reading all kinds of books, and my heroes became people like Harry Mitchell, a great solo around-the-world sailor, and the great divers of the world. I became a reader of adventure books. And one day, at age 11, from a public library, I found a book that has changed my life forever. Joshua Slocum. Without public libraries, this book would never have come into my hands. Our public libraries in South Africa were segregated. This book happened to be in the whites-only library. But I found the courage to go to that library to get this book and to read it. And when I finished reading this book about a man from Boston, a man from Massachusetts, who had circumnavigated the world in the previous century, when he wrote about his adventures, he wrote about a place called Cape Horn. And I thought, just someday, perhaps I could see Cape Horn. I could explore those corners of the world. And I remember going to my dad and saying, hey, Dad, please, can we have a boat? Can you have a boat? But on the money my father was earning, was that realistic? Was that possible? No. But my mother said, son, stay reading, stay dreaming. The application of knowledge truly is your power. I said, Dad, then as you can't buy me a boat, will you take me to the local yacht club? Let me tell you about the local yacht club. Royal Cape Yacht Club. It was rich, it was elitist. The only time someone from my community showed up in the yacht club was to wash dishes in the kitchen or fix broken gear on those boats. But I found the courage to go from boat to boat and say, oh, please, will you take me sailing? No. Oh, please, will you take me sailing? No. Please, Dave, will you take me sailing? Will you? Yes. I got out there, I got on that boat, and guess what? I got seasick. But I read that some of the greatest sailors got seasick, but they overcame it by being involved. You see, when I first arrived on those boats, I did not have any practical experience. All I had was a little bit of knowledge I'd gained from the books I'd read. But most important, what I had was passion and enthusiasm. You cannot teach passion and enthusiasm. It is something that is innate in all of us. I was told to sit here and be quiet. But when you are passionate about something, you will use the opportunity to gain knowledge. And so I began asking all kinds of questions. And ultimately, can I drive the boat? When you bring people together in your team, they may not have all the knowledge, but if they have passion and enthusiasm, they will become an integral part of your team because you can teach the knowledge. You can teach them the experiences. You can help create the opportunities by salting their waters, the world of curiosity. I loved every moment on those boats. And during the week, in my free time, I would return to public libraries to gain books, to gain knowledge from those libraries about the practical aspects of the sport I loved. Public libraries are cornerstones of our society. When you have to make budget decisions, please do not cut the funding to our public libraries. And so, during the week, I gathered knowledge to apply it on the weekend. And the more knowledge I gained, the shorter the distance between the yes or the no and the yes became. It is about what do you bring to the team. Being on board a vessel is about teamwork. Running a city is about teamwork. And you are the team leaders. You are the ones who help take the vision and point the boat in the direction it needs to go. But it takes a crew to trim those sails, to make the boat go in that direction. And I loved every minute on those boats. And so I said to my school friends, one day, I am going to own a yacht. And what do you think they did? They laughed. And I'm sure when some of you said to some of your friends, you're going to run for office, you're going to be mayors or county councillors or city councillors, there are a lot of people who laughed at you. But we don't give up. When I said to my fellow sailors that someday I'm going to own a yacht, they too laughed. But I got myself a visual. I got myself a red jacket. And I hung that jacket where I could see it. And I said, one day, when I own a yacht, I will wear this jacket as a symbol of my success. But till that day, each time somebody criticizes the dream, I will know by looking at this symbol, what it is I'm striving towards achieving. Do you have your red sailing jacket? Do you know what you want to achieve? Where you possibly can go? It's not an easy road. No road is easy, but every road is a journey. And on those journeys are destinations. And where we are right now today is nothing but one of the destinations. I continued reading, I continued dreaming. But yacht club dues come due. I had to pay my way. My parents could not afford to give me that money. I could not afford the train fare from my folks. I had to earn it. The wealthy yachtsmen, they can be somewhat careless. They would drop sunglasses, car keys, and wallets, whatever, overboard. With fins, a swimsuit, and a face mask. With just those items, I would dive down in the marina and retrieved those items. And before I did it back, no ma'am, no sir, that's $5. I took and saved those $5 because these were cold waters very similar to the Puget Sound and your wonderful Washington coast. I needed a wetsuit. And eventually I saved enough money to buy that wetsuit, which meant I could stay in the water longer. I could now scrub hulls and charge more money and save that money so that I could take scuba lessons and ultimately buy my own scuba equipment. Success does not just happen because you want it. Success happens incrementally because we build it. You do not become elected officials by just showing up at City Hall. You knock on the doors and you canvass, and you do what you have to do to garner the votes, to garner the support. And with that, you become successful. I loved every moment I was around the yacht club. I was saving all my money. And when I had excess funds because I'd acquired certain things, I began to invest that money. My wealthy sailing friends spoke freely about the deals they were involved in. People know people. I found a stockbroker. And I said, will you invest my meager savings into this? And they laughed at me. But they did it. And slowly I began to build a portfolio. But most important, we have to learn to fully invest in ourselves. Without that investment in ourselves, no dream, no vision can be fully achieved. And as I was growing up in this yacht club, the very first solo race around the world was getting underway, and Cape Town was going to be a port of call. Oh, by the way, there is a man from Washington State, Mark Schrader, who became the first American to race solo around the world some years later in this event. So your state has been represented in this international solo yacht racing community. And so here I was, the third competitor, happened to come in on a Sunday morning. And just by chance, I happened to be on the dock. And when he came alongside, he looked at the gathering crowd and he said he needed a volunteer. And by the time the word help was out of his mouth, guess who was airborne? Landing on his deck. We coiled the lines, we stowed the sails, we swabbed the decks. And when we were done, I began to ask Richard Broadhead a ton of questions. Richard Broadhead changed my life. This was a very significant moment, a defining moment in my life. You see, he answered every one of my questions. He had not yet gone ashore and hugged his loved ones or spoken to the world media. But he found the time right there and then to talk to this young 14-year-old kid, to help me realize that if my dream was to be a solo around-the-world racing sailor like him, there were certain things that I had to do in order to accomplish that. And one of those things was participate in the O-Star Yacht Race, a solo race from England to America, a race made famous to me by Harry Mitchell. So Richard Broadhead became a big influence in my life at that moment. And when I ran out of questions, his comment was, you know where I'll be for the next 2-3 weeks. Come back, I'll be glad to answer any other questions you may have. And then he went ashore for that first time in over 2 and a bit months. Who in your life has made that impact on who you are that's enabled you to be where you are today? And so the dreams became bigger. The bar got raised higher. The vision extended beyond the horizon. I was committed. I said someday, somehow, I will race my boat solo around the world and continue to wear the jacket with pride. But the dream looked impossible. I was 14 years of age, a working class family. Some people reminded me of being physically disabled and pointed out the color of my skin. And they said, those are not dreams for you. There are no dreams that have limitations. Every dream, if you can imagine it, you can create it. And so I went back to the public libraries, because now I had to ask a question. What will I do to achieve the financial resources to make this boat and this dream happen? There were 2 classes of yachtsmen in my community. Those who were born rich, of which I was not part of, and those who created their own wealth. So I looked to the latter, and I looked at what did they all have in common. They had a knowledge base, and they applied their knowledge base to realize their goals and dreams. And then they took the resources and rewarded themselves with their vessels. So I knew that I had to gain a knowledge base that would support my dream of owning a yacht. So back to public libraries. At age 16, I came across a magazine about commercial divers. And this magazine spoke about how commercial divers traveled all over the world. Cape Town was a crossroad, and I saw people traveling to far corners of the world by sail, and I was dreaming of that travel. This article went on to talk about how commercial divers were part of a tight team. My sailing had taught me teamwork. And then it went on to speak about how much money they were earning. When I heard the numbers, I said, wow, I can afford to own a yacht with that income. But the article was not done. The article went on to speak about the risks and how some divers lost limbs and how a few divers even lost their lives. And I had to pause. I had to ask myself, am I suicidal? Are you willing to put your life on the line for something that you totally believe in? The answer was yes. I am willing to put my life on the line, but I'm not suicidal. I am a calculating risk taker. So we do not perish from the known, we perish from the unknown. So in order to mitigate that risk, I continued doing some research because I decided that I would go to the world's best commercial diving school, obtain the best education, because the more I can know, the better the chances of survival in this world are. The application of knowledge truly is power. And so on further research, that school was in Los Angeles, California, the other end of the world to where I grew up, in Cape Town, South Africa. But I made the commitment, and I said, when we graduate from high school, somehow I will go to California and study commercial diving. And my school friends said, you're going nowhere. You're going to the factories, as we are. You're going to be a drunk like your father because you have these crazy dreams. Give up. I would like to have seen the expression 6 weeks after graduating from high school when they got a postcard from Disney World, California. And on the front was Mickey Mouse, and on the back I had written, I wish you were here too. At age 17, in 1985, I came to this amazing country called the United States of America. I arrived here with $350 in my pocket from the money I had saved diving in the yacht club. I arrived on a one-way plane ticket in America, in the days when a foreigner could travel to America on a one-way plane ticket. Yeah, thank you, Osama bin Laden. You changed that for all of us. But more important, I arrived here with the first month of a 9-month program paid for by everything my parents could raise against their retirement and the house. But most important, I arrived in this country with an attitude that failure was not an option. There were no fallback positions. There were no alternatives. I was going to get one shot at making this work. One shot to realize the treasure chest. Too many young people in America have a lot of options. And because you have so many options, do you fully commit? Is your back fully up against the wall where you say, I will sink or swim? And swim is the only option. You don't go into an election cycle thinking, oh, well, if I don't win, I'll just go and do something else. You go in fully committed. You do what you've got to do. You canvass, you knock on the doors, you shake those people's hands. It's not always comfortable. It's not always fun. But that is what the conviction takes to be successful. As a result, I graduated in the top of my class. And then I went out to get work, and I ended up in the oil fields around the world. I traveled from Southeast Asia to the Gulf of Mexico into the North Sea and became a part of an amazing team. When we were in the North Sea, the holy grail of commercial diving, you have a very short window, a seasonal window, where you have high winds, ferocious seas, and cold temperatures for almost 7 months of the year. So you've got only about 4 or 5 months to accomplish the missions. The team there was the best, and I became a part of those guys. But when the winter came, I was also homesick. And I wanted to return to my country, back to South Africa, to contribute something to our society there. So I decided I'll go and work in South Africa. And I went knocking on the doors of those South African oil companies, only to be told there was no work for me. But yet on the waterfront, I would run into colleagues, people I'd worked with in other parts of the world who were happy to see me so they could pick my brains, to ask me how we solved some of those problems in the North Sea, because they were facing the same challenges. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture? Why are incompetent divers being hired and I'm being told there's no work for me? It boiled down to one word: apartheid. It had nothing to do with my skills. It had everything to do with the color of my skin. And those doors in South Africa never did open in the oil industry. But I said work in South Africa. I didn't ask specifically to work in the oil industry. Beware of what you ask of the universe, because the universe will give it to you. So be specific. The work I could find was mining diamonds on the ocean floor. And yes, ladies, a diamond is a woman's best friend. I was committed to becoming the best underwater miner, and eventually worked myself into the top slot of lead diver on a deep water mining operation. I got to live on board ship and spend months at a time on board ship, sailing sort of around the Diamond Coast and saving my income and investing that income. And then, after sometimes 100 days at sea, I would take 7 to 10 days of shore leave. And I would go and visit shipyards because I was interested in the cost of the yacht of my dreams and what was out there. And then I did the mathematics. When I divided my savings and the rate of return into the cost of these yachts, I realized I'd be about 88, 89 years of age before I could afford the boat. So that plan was flawed. But we did not give up the whole idea. We have to modify the plan. So once more, I returned to public libraries. In my shore leave, I would read everything about naval architecture and how to design a boat. I would go and measure people's boats. And people ask, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm going to find a way to create my own boat. I want to wear this jacket. And then I'd visit shipyards to look at any surplus tools or materials that we're getting rid of. But I realized that I could not build this boat alone. So I ended up losing my job. The company went bankrupt. I got laid off. And my colleagues were very upset because the North Sea and the Northern Hemisphere season had not begun yet. There was no work. So instead of being upset about losing the job, I used the opportunity to say, I will work full-time on this dream. And so I found the Crazy Dutchman, a man that my local community, yachting community, were poking fun at. And I went up to Marinus and said, Marinus, it is your dream to have a customer so you can build a boat for. It is my dream to have a boat. Let us help each other. Let us form an alliance. And so together, he and I began the journey of building a boat. And folks would show up in our shipyard, and they'd look at this boat, and they'd say, gee, guys, are you ever going to finish this piece of junk? And I stood there with pride and said, of course I'm going to finish it. They said, do you think it'll float? I said, it's a boat. Boats float. I tried to get sponsorship. I tried to get a marine mortgage. I went to see a banker. And before I could explain to the banker how to repay the loan, he slammed shut his portfolio and he says, get out of here. You're a black kid. What do you know about boats and the sea? Well, the sea doesn't care whether you are American or South African, black or white, rich or poor. The water will make us equally as wet. And if you make a mistake, the sea will take your life like that. And so with blood, sweat, and tears, we worked away at building my boat, and eventually the day came when I could put on the red jacket, because we wheeled the boat out of the shipyard, the crane arrived, and we launched my 38-foot yacht. When we launched that boat, it was a proud moment when she floated there for the first time. And I got towed around to another area of the marina where there was this beautiful 100-foot yacht. That 100-footer belonged to the banker who threw me out of his office. And one day I heard him say again how embarrassing it was for his fancy multi-million-dollar machine to be on the same dock as my piece of junk. And I stood on the deck and I said, excuse me, sir, is your boat fully paid for? Because mine is. Unless somebody has walked in your shoes, they have no idea how those shoes fit. Some of these small towns might not have the big budgets of a Seattle, but it doesn't mean they cannot aspire to being a great town. Don't let size fool you. Don't give up on the power of the dream. Nobody understands what you go through each and every day to make your cities, to make your municipalities the best in this state and in the country. And so here I am on my boat. And I decided that I am going to enter the O-Star yacht race, the solo race from England to America. And so I called the press together for a press conference. Now, you know all about the press. They can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Depends on what day of the week it is. So quickly, the press pointed out some harsh realities to me. They said that my predecessors, my 3 predecessors who had done this O-Star yacht race, each had been a naval officer. I never went to the Navy. Then the press pointed out that each one of them had been given the national yacht of the country. I built my own 38-foot yacht. Each one of them had been sponsored by the government. I was searching for sponsorship. And each one of them had the naval cadets as a support crew. I looked behind me, and there's nobody. Front page of the sports section. Peterson sails floating coffin. And with that, all chances of finding sponsorship was doomed. We all face bad publicity at some point or another, and we have to make very harsh decisions and choices. I knew that no longer could I remain in South Africa, that the environment and the atmosphere was not conducive to support. So the only other option was to leave. So with the last of my money, there was a thing called GPS, satellite navigation technology. I didn't have enough money for that. But instead, I ended up buying some 500-year-old technology and bid my family goodbye. I bought a sextant. People like Ernest Shackleton, Magellan, and the great adventurers of the previous centuries all had used the sextant to find their way across the oceans. And I bought a book, Celestial Navigation for Yachtsmen. AWC, don't ask me where I was for the first 7 to 10 days. I was busy reading this book, trying to figure out how to use this device. It is about having faith in yourself. We don't always have the answers, but we know where the questions lay, and hence we know what answers we can find to those questions. So I'm sailing off. I cross the equator, and my mother always said to me, son, life isn't always fair. So here I am on the high seas, into the northern hemisphere, feeling lonely, looking for a ship, just any ship to talk to. And I stood tall on my deck looking, when the boom, which carries the mainsail, came flopping across the deck on a swell, like a golf club going at a golf ball. It made perfect contact with my forehead. The boom split open my eyebrow, and I was in deep trouble. I could see the bone of my eyebrow. I was gushing blood. I did not have the money for a medical kit on my boat, nor did I have the money for a distress beacon to say this boat in this location is in trouble. All I thought I had on board was a rusty needle and sailing twine. Could you stitch your forehead back together with a rusty needle and sailing twine? Could you? Nah, nor could I. So I had a huge barrier. But if I am to survive, I have to find a solution. So I dug deep into the treasure chest of my life. And I remembered in science, if you have a bleeding wound and apply pressure to that wound, the bleeding will stop. If you can hold the wound together for long enough, it'll coagulate and grow back together again. Apply pressure, hold it together. And with that, I came up with my solution, a clothes peg. I sailed 800 miles like this to go and see the doctor. The doctor looked at the wound and said, son, the wound is fine, but you need psychiatry help. Ladies and gentlemen, elected officials, AWC, this clothes peg is a symbol to me. It's a symbol of overcoming a barrier to finding a solution. Like this jacket, what do you have that reminds you of your journeys, of what brought you to sit at these very tables? I did not make Plymouth, England that year. I suffered more damage to my boat, and I ended up in Ireland. And the South African media continued to point out to me that the floating coffin almost took my life. The floating coffin almost got lost. I should quit whilst I was ahead. We will always hear the criticism of others, but they don't know what we go through. They don't know what our dreams and our desires are, nor do they know the metal with which is in each and every one of us in this room. If you are going to be a courageous leader, you will go against the mainstream. You will face the critics and say, it doesn't matter, because I know what I can do. In Ireland, the Irish community looked at me. The tide was out. I was on this dock. The media had sort of said that I was rescued. And I remember some guys coming down and looking at me down on the dock and said, "Laddie, where on earth did you say you came from in this thing?" And I looked up and I said, "South Africa." And they shook their heads and said, "Laddie, you are crazy." And then they looked down at me and said, "And Laddie, where on earth did you say you're going in this thing?" And I looked up and I said, "I am going to England. I am going to enter the O-Star yacht race. I am going to meet my hero, Harry Mitchell." And they shook their heads and said, "Now, Laddie, we know you are crazy, but we will help you." For the first time in my life, there was a community who rallied in behind me. A community who didn't see what I lacked, but saw how far I came in this humble vessel to their shores. And realized that if I could come this far, how much further could I not go? How many people in this room have come from humble beginnings and have struggled to win office? And now that you are an elected official, you do not stop here. There is other offices. There are other offices that you can serve in. Nancy running for the Senate. And who knows what else you can achieve in the state of Washington and the United States. The journey is not just about the 1,000 steps. It's about the individual steps you take to achieve that success. So, with the help of the Irish, I began to prepare my boat. And when my boat was done, I ended up speaking in their schools. Because I believed not just in saying thank you, but allowing our action to speak louder than just our words. Everything I'd learned at school, I applied to my dreams of being a sailor, to be able to wear this jacket. Everything that you learned at school, you have applied to your dreams and goals to be the folks who you are. If you and I need that education, need that tertiary knowledge, then every child, not just in the state of Washington, but every child in America and every child on this planet must have an education. Our children are our future. We have to invest in that future. Someday, we are going to be old. Someday, we are not going to be in a position to make decisions any longer. If we don't like what society becomes at that day, it's not because we failed ourselves. It is because we have failed these future generation of young leaders who sit in your schools today. So as mayors and councilmen and councilwomen, your school boards, your school communities, your libraries are the cornerstone of your success, of our collective success. Make sure that we invest wisely in these communities around the globe. And sadly, I'm watching education slide in America, whilst in other countries I'm watching education rise. We are coming into a new level of playing fields today. If we're going to be competitive, we better fix education real fast. And so it was in the Irish community, working with the Irish education and the Irish youth, that I ended up meeting an Irish lass, and I fell hopelessly in love. Her name is Gwen. We became inseparable. But eventually the time came when I had to leave Ireland and sail over to England. That day I sailed off. I might have been alone on my boat, but I was not alone in the world. I sailed away from the Irish shore with the love of Gwen, and I sailed away with the support of all the Irish community. It was an amazing moment to have that support. And when I arrived in England, I was placed on the same dock as my hero, Harry Mitchell. Wow, it was amazing. I saw him there in flesh and blood. And I remember walking up to Mr. Mitchell, and I said, "Mr. Mitchell, You are my hero. I've come to meet you, I've come to greet you, I've come to race against you, and I've come to beat you. And from that day forward, we became firm friends. 28 days later, I crossed the finish line in Newport, Rhode Island, to become the 4th South African to finish that race. Unfortunately for me, Harry Mitchell was on the dock waiting to take my dock lines. I'm very competitive, as you all are. So it was time for some analysis. Why did he beat me? So the first thing I did was I looked at the size of his boat. Harry had a 40-footer, I had a 38-footer. 2 foot. Small boats have beaten bigger boats. Small companies have taken on the giants and survived and been prosperous. Size has nothing to do with this. Small campaigns have beaten big financial campaigns. It's about how much heart do you have inside of you. So the next thing I looked at was Harry's age. Harry was in his mid-60s. I was 24. There was over 40 years of age difference and wisdom between him and I. The things that he had forgotten, I still had to learn. There's a saying, a wise person learns from their mistakes. I say, a smart person finds a wise person so they don't have to repeat the same mistakes. And that's why this association is so important. Because there are lots and lots of smart people in the room. And you don't have to repeat those same mistakes. Learn from each other. That is why the power of networking, the power of collaboration, and that is what makes leaders truly leaders. To have the courage to expose themselves, to lay out their hearts, to show their vulnerabilities, and to say, how can we be stronger? How can we be better? And it's all about raising the standards. So Harry said something profound to me. He said, it was your dream to be a sailor. You've done it. It was your dream to build your own boat. You've done it. It was your dream to race across oceans. You've now done it. What is next? Ladies and gentlemen, I challenge you to always ask, what is next for you? It is very easy as we become victorious to also become complacent, to sit back and grasp and to bask in the glory of success. But whilst you're laying back there and basking, there are others climbing up the mountain and arriving on your ledge. And eventually that ledge will become very crowded. And you're going to get pushed off, or you get to climb up to the next peak. And the higher you climb, the fewer people there'll be up top. So always have a vision, always have a dream, and know what it is you can strive towards. But no, we do not get there alone. So when Harry said to me, what is next? I knew that he had attempted twice before to race solo around the world. And both times, it had been disastrous. So we're having this conversation in Newport, Rhode Island, in 1992. And in 1994 was the next round the world race. And Harry had already announced his entry in the 94 race. So I said, Harry, I'm going to show up in September of 94 in Charleston. I'm going to race against you, and this time I'm going to beat you. And once more we shook hands. And Harry sailed back to England to his wife, and I sailed back to Ireland to Gwen. And I said, Gwen, I am entering the longest race on the planet known to mankind. 27,000 miles around the world, alone. And I need your help. I want to build a new boat. And so we went to the business community to raise sponsorship and spent 6 months trying to raise the dollars, only to have none. And I asked, why won't they sponsor me? And in there lay the question, lay the answer. This is not about me. This is not just about you. It is about what can you do for your constituents. You don't go and win elections because you want to be mayor. You win elections because you can solve the problems of your communities. So we went back to the drawing board. We negotiated the price of a second-hand boat and spoke back to the community about an alliance of linking our community with the sport of sailing and the youth. And I raised some money, but not enough to buy the boat. And that boat got sold from underneath me. There is nothing worse than making promises to people and now not being in a position to deliver. Hello, Washington, like DC, quit making empty promises. So here I am in deep trouble. how am I going to get to the start of this race? I had less than a year to go. So I'm walking around the old boat. How? There has to be a way. And then I looked at the boat, and I had an aha moment. The minimum size requirement for the round-the-world race is 40 foot. My boat, 38 foot. How big is my problem? 2 feet. Just 2 feet. I rushed out. I got plywood. I got fiberglass mat. I got epoxy resin. We stretched the back of my boat. I repainted my boat. And I showed up at the world's greatest yacht race in my new 40-footer. Truly, where there is a will, there shall be a way. And I arrived in Charleston, South Carolina, with 19 of the world's greatest sailors, including Harry Mitchell. And when that race started in September of '94, I got to race from Charleston all the way down the Atlantic Ocean, neck and neck with Harry Mitchell, to Cape Town, South Africa. And there were times that Harry and I were in sight of each other. And when I arrived in Cape Town, I was on the dock waiting to take Harry's dock lines. I beat my friend Harry. Harry came last, I came second last. But it does not matter about where you come. What matters is about showing up. You can't win elections if you are not on the ballot. It's as simple as that. In Cape Town, Gwen helped me prepare my boat for the next leg, as Harry's wife did. And we arrived the day before the restart. And so Harry and I, as competitors, decided to stay back one more day to get ourselves together and then start the race. And we dived deep into the Southern Ocean racing against each other. And some 10, 12 days into the Southern Ocean, I get hit by a major storm. And my boat got turned upside down. And when my boat came back upright, my mast was broken. For me, the race was over. Under what's called a jury rig, I limped back to South Africa. My last communication with Harry Mitchell was, "Your first race for me. I'll be back in 3 years' time." When I arrived back in South Africa, Gwen had to fly back. The media was pretty fierce, telling me that the floating coffin almost took my life. I should quit. I found the money for a new mast, and Gwen and I helped repair the boat, but then I looked at where the fleet was. They had left Australia and they were heading around Cape Horn, across the Pacific Ocean. And then I looked at the distance I had to cover from South Africa, around the Indian Ocean, across the Pacific Ocean, skirting the icebergs, to get around Cape Horn. And I realized I could not get there before the winter set in, before the weather window closed. I am not suicidal, so I made the hard decision to retire from the race. It was not easy. But you've got to know when to hold them, and you have to know when to fold them. And so Gwen and I looked at each other, and I said, why not let me sail the last leg? And so we decided to sail from Cape Town, South Africa, across the Atlantic Ocean to Uruguay, to rejoin the fleet in Uruguay. And every day on that passage, Gwen was seasick. It's amazing when somebody loves you, what they'll do and endure to be with you. But we're about halfway across the Atlantic when I got devastating news. A distress beacon had been activated in an area called No Man's Land. And the Chileans were the ones who went in search of this distress beacon. And the Chileans would fly out, and they'd spend 40 minutes searching. And then, so if they'd come back, and the next flight would go out and spend another 40 minutes searching. And after 5 days, the beacon stopped transmitting. The battery ran out. And they continued their search. And some 2 weeks later, I arrived in Uruguay and faced the hardship. That distress beacon belonged to none other than my friend and hero, Harry Mitchell. Harry was lost at sea. He was 72 years of age, but Harry left behind a powerful message to each and every one of us. Live your life as if today is your last day, because someday you shall be right. Yes, we truly have to seize the moments. This is not a dress rehearsal. So, Harry, with a heavy heart, I sailed this last leg in memory of my friend Harry Mitchell. I sailed back to Charleston, South Carolina, single-handed. Gwen flew back. But I couldn't sit around for 3 more years and do nothing. So I decided to enter the O-Star yacht race for a second time. So once more, Gwen sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to England with me, was seasick. In England, she helped prepare the boat. And then when the race started, she flew from England to Newport, Rhode Island to wait for me. And I'm racing across the North Atlantic, and coming out of the English Channel, solo, I encounter major fog. And I'm pushing my boat hard through the fog. And about halfway into the race, half across the Atlantic Ocean, I get hit by Russian freighter. And my boat had a huge hole in it. And my boat was sinking. And US Coast Guard said, abandon the boat and climb onto the freighter. I couldn't abandon the boat. The boat was my home. The boat was everything I owed in the world. I had no insurance. When they said abandon the boat, I became very obstinate and I said no. So I ended up getting myself a huge pump. And I went to the front of the boat. And every hour, I would pump. I'd pump hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water out of the boat. It would take me about 20 minutes. But does the water stop coming in? No. So I go back and pump again. I pump another 15 to 20 minutes, hundreds of gallons of water. Go and fix the meal, come back and pump. And I did this for 15 minutes every hour, 24 times a day, and I did this for 15 days. Bernard, I'd like to do that for 15 days. Is that not hard work? Yes. But hard work does pay off. I ended up finishing third in my class. I had incentive to get to the finish line before the boat sank or my energy ran out. In 2008, our global economy was hit by its Russian freighter. You saw tax revenues as property values fell. You saw your incomes in your cities and municipalities decline. And with that, you face some very hard decisions. Do you cut services? Do you lay off people? How do you balance your budgets? But you stepped up to the plate. You did what you had to do to find a way to keep the lights on in City Hall. You found a way to make sure that the potholes were still filled and the necessary things were done in the community to keep the community functioning. You pumped. We may not be out of the woods yet. We don't know what tomorrow shall bring. But what we do know is that we have the resilience to overcome anything that life throws at us. I found major sponsorship as a result of this. I was able to fully prepare my boat for the 1998 Round the World race, well in advance of the start. Gwen was once more a part of the team. The day before the start of the race was a worldwide press conference. And I believe it was AWC television said, Mr. Peterson, we have a question for you. So I rose. They said, 4 years ago you failed. What makes you think you will succeed this time? And I said, failed? I said, yes, you failed, you quit, you dropped out. And my response was, I might have been hit on my forehead and I had to use a clothes peg to put it back together again. That was a setback. I might have been dismasted and sailed under jury rig. That was a setback. I might have been hit by a freighter and had to pump for 15 days. That was a setback. Each and every one of us face setbacks. But look at the knowledge, look at the experience, look at the wisdom we gain from those setbacks. Look what we get to put inside our treasure chest of life. Failure is when you quit. Failure is when you say, well, I will not represent my community. I will not seek elected office because I don't care. That is failure. But as long as you keep getting up, as long as you keep overcoming whatever those setbacks are, we shall succeed. And the next morning, I was first across the start line and leading the big boats out of Charleston. I arrived in Cape Town 14 days faster this time, beating many of the multi-million-dollar entries over the finish line. I was in the middle of the pack. Gwen waited for me in Cape Town. I then raced on across the Indian Ocean to Auckland, New Zealand, where once more she waited for me. In Auckland, I began the planning and the preparation for the third leg. That third leg is daunting. That third leg was to take me deep into the Southern Ocean, around Cape Horn. For centuries, vessels have attempted rounding Cape Horn, and a few of them have ended up on the rocks. Harry Mitchell, he lost his life trying to get to Cape Horn. So it was not something I was going to take lightly. And when I arrived 300 miles from Cape Horn, once more I was encountering a major storm. In this major storm, my boat got turned upside down. My mast was in the water. My keel was in the sky. I had no sails set. The boat would pop back upright and surf off the waves, only to turn upside down again. We call that knockdown. I went through knockdown after knockdown. In the first 4 hours, I counted over 37 knockdowns, and the storm raged for 12 more hours. And I was wondering, this night, would my critics be right? Would this boat be my floating coffin? Or am I right to dream?
Yeah, that's a Roger. That's a Roger, and especially with the barometers falling. Manoro, is your barometer falling as well? Over.
On March 11th, 1999, 300 miles before Cape Horn, Neal's dream trip turns into a nightmare. A massive storm hits. Winds are as strong as a hurricane. The waves smother him as he rides out the storm in the cockpit. Tethered to the deck with a 2-foot safety harness, he pulls down all his sails and tries to steer his boat through the churning swells. Repeatedly, his boat is knocked over.
Unfortunately, this is the result of all the knockdowns. We've taken sort of all over the place. Lockers broken. So it's been pretty tough.
2 days after surviving the storm, Neal sights Cape Horn. At last, he experiences the awe others wrote about in the books he read as a child. He feels immense joy. After all, more people have traveled into outer space than have sailed past this place alone.
Well, there she is, the Horn and I. Sort of what a sight, and it's just been absolutely great being here. It's taken 17 years of dreaming. It's taken a lot of planning, a lot of preparation. It's taken the support of many people. My sponsors, my family, most important Gwen. But we are here. I think of Harry Mitchell, who gave his life for this site. And a few minutes ago, I paid tribute to my friend Harry. You know, it's a very special place, this, the bottom of the world, the edge of the world. And to get here takes courage, perseverance, determination, dedication. It takes a dream. I'm 31 years of age, and I've lived my dream now. It's taken hard work, but it was worth it. I've risked my life through 77 knots wind storms, but it was worth it. I hope every young person has an opportunity to live their dream as I've now lived mine, to look at this magic piece of land.
Of all the billions and billions of people who have lived on Mother Earth, less than 270 of us have sailed alone around the world via the Southern Ocean and Cape Horn. In May of 1999, when I ran to Cape Horn, I did not do it to prove my critics wrong. I did it to prove that I was right to dream, that I could take a boat some called the floating coffin to the furthest parts of our planet, gather the treasures of my life and experiences, and survive. When I arrived in Uruguay, I had completed the circumnavigation of the world, but not finished the race yet. Gwen was waiting for me, and we began the preparations for the last leg. And after a few weeks in port, Gwen asked if the boat was ready to go to sea. I said, soon. And when I finally said yes, she said, well, I'm leaving. And I said, you mean tomorrow, after the start? And she said, no, I'm leaving us. I had proposed marriage 3 times, including earlier that week. I told this woman how much I loved her, but I was not successful. And I watched her walk down the dock, and I've never seen her since that day. Strike one. I was devastated. I don't know how I got through the days that followed. But time heals all wounds. And out there in the high seas, there's lots of time to reflect. But eventually, there was the finish line. When I crossed that finish line, I had just raced 27,000 miles around the world. I've been at sea for 9 months, from leaving Charleston to returning to Charleston. Collectively, I'd been at sea for 195 days, 16 hours on board my boat. And my satellite telephone bill was $84,000. And so I get towed from the finish line to the dock. And when I arrive at the dock is sinking under the weight of hundreds and hundreds of school children. The largest group who turned out for the finisher. And I'm looking at all these kids, and I'm remembering 18 years previously. 18 years before that, I was a kid on the dock, looking at Richard Broadhead finishing his first leg of his first round-the-world race. And Richard Broadhead has no idea that I became a solo racing sailor like him. I can't find him to say thank you and to tell him of my journey. He has no digital footprint. When I looked at those kids, I wondered who is going to emulate me. When you look at the kids in your community, who is going to emulate you? As leaders, you have to be courageous. You have to be true leaders and be aware that whatever you do, somebody is watching. Somebody is going to emulate you. So let's make sure your actions are always positive. And so, the prize-giving party. The night of the prize-giving party was the best night and the worst night. It was the best night because I received my trophy for finishing the round-the-world race. This race is so hard that everybody who comes back to the finish line is a winner. Harry Mitchell lost his life dreaming of holding that trophy. It was sad for two reasons. The first was, there's no way I could have been at the finish line if Gwen was not in my life. It was because of her love and her support and everything she did for me that enabled me to become a veteran of the solo race around the world. I would not stand on this platform here with you in Vancouver, Washington today had she not been in my life. Behind each and every one of us, there are those invisible folks, those folks who make huge sacrifices to help us to be successful. Never forget who they are. We cannot function without them. And it was sad for a second reason. Now what? What do I do for the rest of my life? I never thought beyond the race. This had been my objective. So I moved into a cottage and I began working on my autobiography, Journey of a Hope Merchant. And I'm writing away, and I had to get back out there and date again. And I came home from a date one evening, only to discover my house had burnt down. And I lost everything. I lost my trophies, I lost my photographs, I lost my entire history. It was devastating. The only few things to survive was my sextant and these two books, Strike Two. And a friend of mine said, Peterson, something good is going to come out of this. And that moment it was hard to find the good in being homeless. Thankfully, there was a fire department who could respond and save something of the memories. So I'm driving back to the house the following day. The media had run stories, and all of a sudden I put my foot on the gas, and I hear the engine revving, but nothing's happening. The car's coming to a stop. The transmission of my car had fallen out. Strike three. Baseball, 3 strikes, you are out. But life is not baseball. Life doesn't matter how many strikes you get. You step up to the plate, and you keep swinging that bat. So I call a car dealer friend. I said, Eddie, you've got to help me find wheels. And this is my budget, and by the way, I need reliable wheels. Now, my budget and reliable should not have gone in the same sentence. Shoestring campaigns, you all know about those. And so he said he'll see what he can do. He'll see if he can find a miracle. And the next morning, on August the 7th, 1999, he called me up and said, guess what? A car just came in. You've got to come today. So I called my various friends looking for a lift to the car dealer. They at work. I called my various dates. I get voicemail. And around lunchtime, my phone rings, and there's a stranger on the phone. A stranger saying, hey, I read about the fire yesterday. Is there anything I can do to help? I said, yes. Can you give me a lift to the car dealer? At 5 o'clock, on August the 7th, 1999, a Friday afternoon, I laid eyes on the stranger. I remember the skirt she was wearing. I thought, wow, she's cute. She's my lift. And so we went to the car dealer. We went to a movie. We went to a late-night dinner. And 5 months later, I married her. Yes, I would never have met my wife had the house not burnt down. I want to introduce you to my wife, Darlene Christy Peterson, the love of my life. It's amazing when you find the right partnership, what can be done. When we got married, most people said 1 and 1 equals 2. But I truly believe when you have the right partnership in the relationship, 1 and 1 equals 11. And so together, We have traveled the world. We ended up buying a catamaran, the very boat out of the magazines, the boat of my childhood dreams. We ended up buying a home in the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic, and in a week's time, I'll be at our estate in the Caribbean, in the mountains. The sandy beaches are not far away. When you have a vision, and when you are willing to apply, you will find things that will happen that will enable the material things to become a reality. But life isn't about the material things. Life is about the legacy. What is it that you're going to leave behind? What are you going to be remembered for? What will be your contributions? My mother said to me that if you could answer yes to these 3 questions, life will be without struggle. And 6 years ago, I added a 4th question. 6 years ago, I became a grandfather. My wife has a son, and when I held Shelby Grace, our granddaughter, in my arms for the first time, I looked at her and I thought about the world. And I thought about whatever I do, is it right for me? Whatever I do, is it right for my family? Whatever I do, is it right for my community? But truly, whatever I do, is it right for the next generation? We have to think generationally. We have to answer emphatically yes to all 3 of these questions so that we truly can make an impact. And you, as elected officials, know better than anybody else that we've got to fix these things. Washington is broken. Washington is not capable of fixing things here and I talk about Washington, D.C., not Washington State. And sometimes the State House is broken as well. And everything rests on your shoulders. You are the ones who walk in the streets. When things go wrong, your next-door neighbor comes over and knocks on your door. When you are in the grocery store, your fellow neighbors tap you on the shoulder. So you have the ability to truly look towards the future and look towards what can be done as the legacy for not just your cities, not just Washington State, but the United States and our world. Truly, it is our choice to go through life and to decide whether we shall carry baggage or instead we shall carry a treasure chest. You know which choice I made because I truly believe in life there are no barriers, there are only solutions. Thank you so much for being here.